Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Gruver. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Welcome to another edition of the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Mefford.
And I'm Kathy Gruver, and we are so excited today to have a very special, fabulous guest, my friend, Gregg Unterberger. Woo!
Yay, Gregg!
Yay! All right, Gregg, we are so happy you're here. Tell everybody at home a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Where to begin? I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I'm in private practice in Georgetown, Texas, and College Station, Texas. And I'm interested in sort of cutting-edge psychological techniques that help forward people on their personal journeys, whether it's psychological or spiritual. Look at exciting, sort of cutting-edge ways to move things ahead more quickly for people.
Nice. Well, and that's what we like to do here. We want to encourage people to tap into their full potential. And I know I met you at a really cool Edgar Cayce event. What was that it was down in Los Angeles, right?
Yes.
And I was fascinated by what you did, and I've got your book, and you just do some amazing stuff to help people move their journey forward. And one of the things that I know you specialize in is something called Brainspotting. So Jason has no clue what Brainspotting is.
All right, we're going to get to geek out today. I love it.
We're going to geek out about Brainspotting. So tell us where that came from and what the history of that is and how that can help people unlock their potential.
Well, it's kind of exciting work. There was a modality that's been out for a while called Emdr, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, that's been used to treat trauma. And a doctor in New York City, Dr. David Grand, was using that particular technique. And he noticed that when he invited his clients to look in a particular direction from a certain eye position, that seemed to trigger a deep processing in the brain. And as Dr. David Grand likes to say, where we look affects how we feel. And in casual conversation, when you're talking with someone, you may notice that your eyes are glancing away, not making direct eye contact with them. And you launch into a story and you kind of are staring into a spot, and allows you to access a memory or process a memory differently. And David Grand noticed this. He was working with a competition skater, and she could not land a triple loop. And he had done a lot of work with her on peak performance and couldn't quite find what the block was in her landing the triple. And he was doing the eye movement therapy, in which the therapist moves their fingers back and forth to stimulate both hemispheres of the brain through eye positions. And he noticed that when he stopped and slowed down on this particular area, it evoked an emotional response in the skater. And she wept, and a bunch of information came out, a bunch of emotional release work came out. She went out and landed the triple the next day. So David Grand decided that there was something in fixed eye positions that could trigger specific neural networks in the brain to help process trauma or enhance peak performance, which is very exciting work. And he currently works with sports figures and athletes, actors and actresses, band members, that kind of thing. And of course, he treats trauma too, using this particular technique. It's an odd name, though, isn't it? Brain spotting. It makes it sound like you take off somebody's cranium and dot him with paint or something. But it refers to a specific eye position that can resonate and trigger neural networks associated with trauma to work through trauma or to enhance peak performance. Almost like we're mashing the button in the brain that says I can do it, and then playing that like a loop over and over again.
Well, that's what I mean. Stuff like this is just fascinating to me, right? I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm like a closet psychology nerd, right? I read all this stuff. I read a lot of the studies and other things too. And that's why, to me, it's just so fascinating, what goes on upstairs that so many people aren't actually tapping into. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's interesting because like you said, Dr. Grand, actually uses this, and you use this with people all the time, right? But it's one of these things that probably people have never heard of, have never thought about. And some people might be like, come on, that's kind of crazy. That's crazy stuff.
Oh yeah.
Making me move my eyes and all of a sudden now I can land a triple. And it's like, yeah, because it works, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like you said, top athletes, actors, actresses, people like this are using it. People are using this all the time to unlock the potential, get rid of the trauma, help them with peak performance. So that's why we're excited to have you here to be able to talk about this, because, hey, the average Joe or Jane can use this too. It's not just for, those ultra successful people. We can all use it as well to help us unlock our potential too.
So have you found when using this technique, Greg, specifically with people, maybe not sports performance per se, but just enhancing, whether it's writing or music or business, do you find that there's a block that has to be removed first before you can enhance that peak performance? Is there typically something that's stuck, or is it just a matter of enhancing stuff that's already good?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. And what's interesting about the process is it's very, very organic. And so I don't have to know what the block is for the client. What we do is, and again, I'm way oversimplifying, but we find the eye position that triggers the neural networks that are associated with the issue that they're working on. And we can both use it to refire a positive experience. Let me back up the bus if I may take a few minutes.
Yeah.
So I was working with a gentleman who will remain nameless who was a competition bodybuilder. We'll call him Sam for the purposes of this. I value confidentiality, as my clients do. Don't want to lose my license. Don't want to disappoint anybody. Sam was a bodybuilder, though, and he was going to one of his first major competitions. And he was excited, but he felt a little overwhelmed. Hey, I'm new to this, and I don't know what I'm doing. And so I said, Sam, I want you to focus on a memory where you felt really confident and competent. And I'm changing some of the details here, but he remembers being at a baseball game and, how he had the grip of the bat in his hands and how the ball came at him, and then he was really focused, and he said it was almost like it was in slow motion. And then he connected with the ball and hit a home run. And he remembered running around the bases and coming in, and his teammates all, scoring the winning run and winning the game. So I want you to focus on that. It's probably not new to most of your listeners, but the psychologist Donald Hebb over 40 years ago said, the neurons that fire together wire together. Yep. The more we think something, the more we think something. There's a reason why 20 years after we learn how to ride a bike, we can get on ride a bike, and we do it all over again, because there's a well-established highway of thought that is well-wired, that even though it's been dormant in the brain, it's still there. So if we fire that back up again, and strengthen it, almost like playing a song over and over on your iPod or on your CD player, where it's like, I really like this song, and you learn every nuance, right where the rim shots are, and right where the break is, so you can wag your tush just the right way, or you can know all the lyrics. Okay, and so what I did is I fired the memory of, we found the eye position that correlated with it, and that fired the brain spot, and he played that sense of success and confidence and competence over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And it just kept expanding and getting bigger, and the smile on his face, when we work on this, we stimulate the brain spot visually, and then maybe spend 10 or 15 or even 20 minutes on it. And tears are pouring down his eyes. It was the best day of my life. I can do this. If I can connect under pressure in front of people, I can do fine as a bodybuilder. And the mind then generalizes from that experience. It builds on that, it strengthens that neural network, and then generalizes and says, hey, you know what? If I can knock a home run in under all this pressure, I sure as heck can get out there and knock it out of the park in this competition.
Wow. That's so great.
Okay, so I'm gonna geek out a little bit and ask a few questions then about that. So let's just take this example, right?
Yes, sir.
So, again, are there, as you're moving your eyes back and forth, and I'm trying to do this here, so hopefully I won't trigger something and start crying. But is there, like you said, you were kind of moving back and forth until you found that spot. Are there certain kind of places that we glance? Like I know from my years as doing fraud investigations and other stuff, some of the NLP type of things to look for truth telling versus not truth telling, right? And so a lot of times, like if you ask somebody a question, they glance up to the left. Left is usually, I'm trying to remember if I get this right. Left means past, right? And right means future, if I remember right. Or did I get it backwards? Did I get it backwards? I can't remember. But anyway, that because if we tend to, as we're thinking, to just unconsciously like look up to the left or up to the right, it means, again, we're triggering certain parts of the brain. So fraud investigators use this to say, are you recalling a past event, or are you in the future making something up to lie?
Something out of your wazoo. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. And so is there correlation on that, I guess, as far as where most of the stuff is, or is it kind of random, and as a therapist, you're just trying to find where that right place is for people?
it's highly individualized. And so what works for one person won't work for another. It's not like there's a grid in my mind like, oh, I'll go upper left and that will trigger the memory for them.
Mm-hmm.
What we look for is what I love about brain spotting, it's very different from a lot of other therapeutic approaches in that it's wildly organic. And I am trusting the client to know their client's body, in effect, to know where the response is. So if I said, for example, when I work with the guy that I'm calling Sam, I said, Sam, think about the baseball game and hitting the home run. Let that become as real as possible. And he closes his eyes. And then I have him open his eyes and I say, okay, Sam, look straight ahead at my finger. Or I actually use an antenna, a pointer. And it looks like the antenna from a 57 Chevy, right?
It does. I just
Great car.
work with that.
Paying for this? But we position it directly in front of their eyes and then say, okay, open your eyes now. Notice how it feels in your body. And they'll say something like, well, I feel warmth and expansive and I'm successful. And some clients, when they're in performance mode, they'll feel their backbone straight and their shoulders go back. It's like, I'm standing tall and proud. My heart's open. I feel this energy. I feel strong. I feel grounded. And I'll say, okay, now look at my finger. Now, does that feeling in your body, does it feel stronger here or over here? And then I'll move along, I guess it's the x-axis. And we'll narrow that down and they'll say, oh, it's much stronger over here. Okay. And sometimes I'll move on to something. If someone has a trauma, an unprocessed trauma, we'll move in the other direction and they go, oh, no. And they'll literally reach out and grab the pointer and move it because it will trigger unresolved trauma, which is another way we can use brain spotting, but not so much for peak performance. Okay. Brain spotting can be used to unearth buried trauma that's sort of frozen in psyche and bring it up and process it. But for our purposes today, we're talking about peak performance. So we're looking for where it feels really good, where that sense of I can do this and confidence expands. We find it on the x-axis, I guess it is, and then on the y, and then even on the z-axis, moving farther and closer away. And the client, I know it sounds crazy, but they'll have a felt response in their body, sometimes subtle, sometimes more pronounced. Kathy and I played with this a little bit. Kathy, could you feel it? Were you surprised that you feel it so viscerally in your body when the wand moved around?
Yeah, but actually the one that I was going back to is when we did this down in LA and Gregg had us pair up with someone and I didn't know anybody in this room and you had us radiate the most fabulous feeling ever. And I don't even remember what I went to, but the guy found a spot and I think mine was up and to the left or up and to the right. And I remember staring at that and just this feeling of just elation and exuberance. I mean, like I'm crying it was the most phenomenal feeling because it was the happiest moment of my life magnified 5 million times. And because I, as much as I believe in pretty much everything, I have a very sensitive BS meter and I am a skeptic to most things until I see that it does.
You should be. It's crazy looking at first blush.
Yeah, so, but I remember kind of going home and going, holy crap, that was the most amazing thing. It was really cool. And, you and I kept in touch since then. We only met those 2 times, once just recently in Austin, where we played again with the brain spotting and helped get rid of some trauma and fear and radiated some good feelings. I mean, it was truly amazing. And I know it's something that, and we didn't do it for peak performance. We did it just for like radiating feelings and stuff like that. But I can see how that would work because as a hypnotherapist, I have done that. It's like tap into when you did feel successful, when you did feel confident, when you did feel in love, and let's anchor that feeling in your body so that you can reuse that sensation. And I mean, this is a phenomenal addition to psychology and hypnosis and, all the stuff that Jason and I talk about all the time. So no, it was a really cool technique. And it is a little surprising because you're like, I'm staring at a pointer. Like, what is that going to do? It works. It did stuff.
Well, yeah. And that's why, because as I'm thinking about this too, it's like, trying to maybe analogize this to some of the people that might be listening, right? Because again, the more that I understand and learn about the brain, it is just a fascinating hunk of whatever it is, right? That we use, consciously only 10% of it, but there's a lot of stuff going on up there that we don't have consciously any realization of what's happening. Mm-hmm. And so, like you said, moving around your finger and all of a sudden somebody going, whoa, no, right? And how many times as humans are we, because I find myself doing this, right? Where somebody will say something and it triggers something, right? And again, it may be just in a word or a tone, but there's something that triggers in my brain, and I have some unresolved trauma probably because all of a sudden I start feeling kind of, weird and defensive and, whatever else, that these emotions all of a sudden start cropping up, right? And when that happens, because that first 6 or 7 seconds is all, that subconscious stuff that we don't realize, and we can't start processing it until about 7 seconds later of trying to realize or try to figure out what is it that's holding me back, right? Like the bodybuilder, there may be some trauma as well as, peak performance confidence kind of stuff. That's holding you back, because I know I've seen that in my life too, where I'll go and want to do something, and then I'll just almost sit here kind of comatose, like I can't move, right? It's like I know I need to do something, or I need to, but I'm just kind of like locked in, for some reason, because there's something going on up here that is probably unresolved that I consciously can't process because it's still in my subconscious. Right. And so this technique actually kind of helps people unlock some of that stuff, whether it's, those positive things to reinforce over and over again, or to work through some of that, unresolved trauma that's in their life.
Well, it's tricky, isn't it? Because it can be, we think about that picture of the iceberg with so much of it underwater, and that's unconscious. Give another example. I work with a woman who was 6 figures. She was an executive, and she was always nervous doing presentations, and she could not figure out why. And this was one of those cases, Kathy, where we didn't just expand the neural networks associated with positive thinking and confidence and feeling good about her work, but as we processed, we can also find, and kids, do not attempt this at home. This is why we have trained therapists. You don't want to use brain spotting on your own to treat trauma. No. With a professional, there are some applications in my book, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit later. There's a whole chapter on brain spotting and another light technique called spiritual activation, and there is a home application for this that can be used safely by the general public. That is a lot of fun to play with. That you don't have to have Carl Jung or Freud at your fingertips to do that work, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Anyway, this woman was an executive making 6 figures, and she would always get frightened when she'd stand up in front of the board and try and talk. And she couldn't link it to anything. She was attractive. She was certainly well-spoken. She was intelligent. There was no reason at first blush why she should have any blocks about speaking to people. But every time she'd get incredibly nervous. And as we started to process using brain spotting and EMDR, these memories came of being a little girl, and it was show and tell time. And she raised her hand and told the teacher, "Oh, I can't show and tell. I need to go to the bathroom." And the teacher said, "No, you didn't. You just went. Come do show and tell." Well, you can kind of see where this is going. Bless her heart. She gets up and tries to talk to the audience and gets even more scared of her kids with the show and tell object. She wets herself. All the kids are laughing. She's horribly embarrassed. And what links up in the mind at the level of trauma, horrible embarrassment. I don't belong in the tribe. I'm different. I can't do this. And then that lies in wait in the unconscious. And then 30 years later, she's trying to talk to people at her board meeting. And some part of her goes, "You're going to wet yourself." I mean, it doesn't make rational sense.
Right.
At an unconscious level, the body plays it out. My stomach is pitting out. My heart is beating fast. Oh my gosh. And of course, when we're nervous, what do we want to do? Go to the bathroom 3 times. Talk. Kathy, back me up on this. We're both, so that made it even worse for her. So on the other side of processing that, she could get up and speak in front of people, and it wasn't an issue anymore.
Yeah. She showed during that show and tell. Do you have to know what the trauma is? Did she have to get to a point where she could identify, hey, or can you just erase the trauma without necessarily knowing what it was?
Okay, so when we do brain spotting and EMDR for trauma treatment, one of the nice things about it is people will often say, "I have a shadowy memory of sexual abuse," which is real common. With little kids, they block a lot. Their memories, their brains aren't fully developed. And of course, there's a certain amount of dissociation or blocking of memory that comes with trauma anyway. And what's exciting is I can say to my clients, they'll say, but I don't know exactly what happened. Uncle Billy took me down into the cellar and there was a candy dish and that's all I remember. And it's like, that's fine. And sometimes we never get to the specific memory, which to the rational mind, it's like, well, you got to have that to unlock this. But as it turns out, all we need to do is process through the memory using Brainspotting or EMDR, stimulate the brain to break the link to the amygdala, the seat of the fight or flight response. And sometimes a lot of the memories will come and there'll be additional pieces of it, but very often they'll cry or they'll shake and they'll release that energy that's in the freeze response. Remember, when the amygdala, the seat of the fight or flight response, there's also fight or flight or freeze. Uncle Billy's getting me. I can't scream, I can't holler, I can't cry. And there'll be an emotional release. And on the other side of that release, they'll say, I still can't remember, but I can think about Uncle Billy now and it doesn't bother me anymore. It doesn't mean that what he did was right. And it doesn't mean it was a happy day for me. But it does mean that's in my long-term memory, and I can think about it now without it bothering me. I can talk about it like, I had a ham sandwich for lunch yesterday, and when I was 12, I was sexually abused by my uncle. And the feeling tone is very different than, oh my God, every time I think about that, my heart beats fast.
Right. Well, and I absolutely. And I know for us in hypnosis, like we don't ever go on a hunting expedition. We don't, if your brain blocked it blocked it for a reason. I had a client who had an unfortunate plane accident and his son ended up dying in the plane with him. The dad survived, the kid didn't. And at one point he said, I don't remember what happened once I hit the water.
Yeah.
I remember hitting the water and I remember being at the surface. Can you hypnotize me to tell me what happened in between? And I said, oh, hell no.
I'm not going there.
No. Why do your brain shut that off for a very specific reason? You do not need to know what happened under that water.
Yeah.
And he was kind of, I think on one level he was like, oh, thank God, because you don't really want to know. But on one hand, he wanted to know. I'm like, nope, there's no way. So with something like the brain spotting, I would be able to disconnect that trauma without necessarily knowing what happened under the water is what you're saying. So that's good.
The plan I never remember. And there are people that have said in the middle of processing, I'll say, and then what happened? Because I always encourage my clients to talk to me about what they're seeing or feeling.
Yeah.
But occasionally someone will say, I'm just too embarrassed to talk about this, or this is too shameful. And I say, that's fine. Keep looking at the spot. And we keep going. And it's not like it has to, or it should be spoken aloud. The client can still process through to a resolution without having to give me all the details of it. As strange as Brainspotting is, I do want to weigh in a little bit. There's an amazing video that maybe we can post on your website or one of your websites about Dr. Grand treating a Major League Baseball player named Mackie Sasser, who struggled.
I got about halfway through the video and then it quit on me. But yeah, no, it was really fascinating up to that point. Yeah.
He struggled with an anxiety disorder for decades, and he did 3 sessions of brain spotting after he'd spent literally tens of thousands of dollars on therapy. And he did three brain spotting sessions, and it resolved it for him. There was work that was done at Sandy Hook after the Sandy Hook massacre. And of all the therapies that were used, the #1 rated intervention for adults, brain spotting, rated twice as effective as the one that came in second place by the people, by adults after Sandy Hook. For kids, it was equine therapy, working with horses. But for the adults, it was brain spotting. So the brain spotting's new. It's been around about 10 or 12 years. It's taking off because clinicians see how well it works and how quickly it works. Which is very exciting because, whether it's peak performance, you want to get better at what you do. I think I did 3 sessions with a bodybuilder total. It doesn't have to take years in therapy or to eradicate trauma. There's one study with EMDR, the eye movement therapy, it's not brain spotting, which is holding still, where there was a group of veterans, combat war veterans, and they did 12 sessions of EMDR. They were all diagnosed initially with post-traumatic stress disorder. At the end of those 12 sessions, 77.7% no longer met the criteria for PTSD.
Oh.
It's 3 months of therapy. I think even 10 years ago, people would say that's impossible. And I think the general public thinks about post-traumatic stress disorder as like, this is permanent, or if you have a horrible memory from childhood or a rape, you just got to live with the nightmares forever. You don't. You absolutely do not.
No. Well, that I think is one of the biggest messages, because I talk to people all the time that are like that. They feel like, I got abused when I was younger, or whatever else the thing was. And they're like, I'm just fucked up for my whole life now. Yeah. And it's like, no, you're not, right? Yes. You can actually, like you said, neurons link together. We can also break those apart.
We can. And
this is one of those ways to do it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And also it's exciting because it doesn't mean that, there are the odd client or whatever that needs long-term support and may need to do years in therapy. For most clients, even people that have been traumatized or have anxiety attacks, they'll start getting results within a few months, and sometimes even sessions.
Wow, that's awesome. Hey, we've got just a couple minutes left. Greg, I want to hear about your book. I can't reach it. It's right in it's like right there. Okay, I'm going to.
You slide out of the screen. Where did Kathy go?
Jason laughing and smiling and Greg nodding.
There we go.
There we go. Thank you for the free plug. Yeah, the book is called The Quickening, Leaping Ahead in Your Spiritual Journey. And the name is a little misleading in that our psychological journey and our personal journey to have more peace in our lives, to be more successful in business and in our personal life, to have stronger personal connections. You can call that spiritual, or you can call that personal, or you can call that psychology. But the book looks at different ways, including Brainspotting that we talked about today, and EMDR, along with lots of other techniques, some that you can use at home on your own, the home game, if you will, and some that need to be facilitated. Exciting ways to really jump ahead so that you're not spending years in therapy or years with post-traumatic stress or anxiety. Or fighting depression. I got some skin in the game. There's some of my personal journey in there too. And I tried to write it in such a way that it would be fun to read too, and not too stuffy. Mm-hmm. So if you're interested in rocketing ahead and tired of the usual step-by-step kind of approach, this looks at ways that literally you can leap ahead, save yourself a lot of time, get to where you want to go faster.
That's awesome. Yeah, I started reading it on the plane on the way home from Austin, and it's got such great stuff. You just open it up and there's phenomenal stories, phenomenal info and techniques and things that you can either investigate with a professional or, like you said, use on your own. So how can people find you, Greg? What's the website? What's the best way to find the book and get in touch with you?
You can contact me directly through my office in Georgetown and in College Station. That number is 512-451-9527. Again, 512-451-9527. My website, which is out of date, and I'm hearing Kathy in the back of my head saying, "You got to update your website, Greg." And you're absolutely right. But nonetheless, it's out there. GreggUnterberger.com. I told my mom about my website, and I said, and it has an original name, Gregg Unterberger. I came up with it all by myself.
No, I came up with that for you, right?
No, you didn't. Yeah. GreggUnterberger.com, just all lowercase, and you Facebook friend me too. So I'm on Facebook, and I'll keep you updated. Do workshops around the country that explore this. Of course, do individual therapy. I have people fly in for individual extended sessions so they can do some deep work and knock out a chunk of their journey in a hurry. Be happy to work with you.
Yeah, Greg does great work. I've been in his care twice, so it's been fabulous. So excellent. Jason, shall we wrap it up?
We should wrap it up because, Greg, thank you for coming on today, because I think it's, we're about trying to help people unlock their potential and help them be happier and have less stress in their life. And again, as a professional, you're here again with us to reinforce to people that, look, if you've got anxiety, if you have fear and stress, if you've got these unresolved traumas, you don't have to just push through. There's actually ways to help you, and not just years of talk therapy, but there's some groundbreaking new scientific and psychological things that have come out that are working, and just do them. Right. I mean, again, it might not work for everybody, you know, like when you're talking about Sandy Hook, you know, equine worked better for the kids. Okay. But, you know, try something because if you really want to live the full life and have that joy, you know, and have that quickening, right? Back to the book title, right?
Yes,
Give it a try, you know, and I'm glad that you came out with a book like this that shows people also some home things that they can do as well, right?
Yeah.
Because some of us on our journey, we got to play with it a little bit at home to begin with before maybe we're comfortable. So there's some things they can play with, but there's also professionals and way that they can reach out. So
Yeah.
I loved this. This is like Jason totally geeking out today. I love it.
Cool. All right, everybody. Look forward to joining you for another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm Kathy Gruver, and I can be reached at kathygruver.com.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. So go forth, unlock your potential, and we'll see you on another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast.